Forgive me, folks, for the lighting. This is a conversation that I'm going to try to have in a very serious way. Uh, Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to anybody out there watching. This was a subject or a topic that I was asked to speak about by Free Music. And we're talking about abuse. For the conversation, or the sake of the conversation, let me define what I mean by abuse, just by definition, just for those that are watching. What I mean by abuse, a verb, the verb tense, use, something to bad effect or for bad purposes, misuse. Example, the judge abused his power by imposing fines. Noun, to treat a person or animal with cruelty, violence, especially regularity or repeatedly. Example, riders who abuse their horses should be prosecuted. Okay, well, basically what I mean by abuse for the sake of this conversation is basically to misuse, to mistreat, to basically harm a person, be cruel to a person or animal, just for the sake of wanting to cause harm. That's something that could definitely be considered or is abuse. And I'm going to try to break this down in 3 parts. I'll probably be speaking to somewhere around the 9 o'clock hour, Eastern Standard Time. And basically what I want to try to do in this first conversation is basically identify what abuse is, which basically by definition I just talked about. What abuse is to treat a person or animal with cruel violence, especially regularity or repeatedly. So, somebody repeatedly treating you with, unnecessary, unwarranted violence, just for the sake of being cruel to you. So that's what I'm talking about with abuse. And I just want to talk about some of the types of abuse that people face. This is not meant to be an exhaustive conversation about abuse, because there are many forms of abuse that really would take a long time to cover, and there's a lot of forms of abuse that people face on an everyday basis that are just maybe too exhaustive to cover. Some things like folks say can be prosecuted, some things can't. Some things can be proven, some things can't. And according to thehealthyplace.com, abuse can occur in the workplace, the home, the church, the streets, anywhere where people dwell. And the different types of abuse you have is emotional abuse, aka psychological abuse, financial abuse, how people manipulate you through money. It could be stock exchange, it could be check scams, it could be different frauds that people have against you, financial abuse. Then there's physical abuse, somebody assaulting you or just beating you up, in a situation, just wanting to attack you for various reasons. Then there's verbal abuse, the things that we say to each other verbally, which attack us with our words. Some people say sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never hurt me. And that's not true. I mean, as it said in the Bible, the words, life and death is in the power of the tongue. Anything can happen when you use words. You can destroy somebody. You can lower their self-esteem. You can cause them to get suicidal, depending on who they are or what they're about. And that's verbal abuse. Then there's elder abuse, people abusing folks because they're, old and vulnerable or elderly. And I like to add to that child abuse or teenage abuse, and any as well, or any vulnerable person being abused. Granny Master says, but whips change and leather makes a party. Yeah, that's true too. But that's a different type of thing. Sorry, had to enter with a joke. Yeah, I get it. You got some levity, Granny Monster there. But I guess I'm trying to come at it in a serious way, because I know Free Music, when I asked him, I said, how do you want me to address abuse? And he says, just, all the forms that you can. Because I think this is something that really needs to be talked about, or just addressed for those folks that don't understand, how abuse comes. And I just talked about the different types of abuse, emotional abuse, aka psychological abuse, financial abuse, physical abuse. Then there's also the big one for women, sexual abuse. Sexual abuse happens in relationships, sometimes when you're not in relationships. Granny Monster says, but yes, this is a serious topic. Yes it is. And I don't take a joke in any negative type of way. I'm just trying to identify different forms of abuse people go through. In the next conversation, what I'll do is I'll make the attempt to talk about just my thoughts and feelings, or anybody else's thoughts and feelings about, you know, what they may go through when it comes to abuse. And then in the third conversation, who knows, I'll probably try to give some resources that people can go to, you know, websites or different phone numbers or places where people could go to that are actually facing abuse. Because, you know, you do have it all too often where people are ashamed, you know, to come out and say that they're being abused, or, you know, people are just really like, you know, iffy about talking about whatever it is that they're going through, you know, and sometimes people don't want to be real about what's going on with people and identify the signs of when somebody's being abused. Also, there's spiritual abuse, you know, which, you know, people being abused through religious practices or misled in that way, you know, and that's a whole other deep conversation that I don't even know if we have time to go into, you know, because I know how people feel about religion and stuff like that. But there are many other forms of abuse which have not been mentioned, you know, stuff like political abuse, you know, politicians, or, you know, just from authoritative standpoint, you know, just different forms that people don't normally think about, you know, in relationships with people, you know, parenting, you know, situations, you know, how, you know, they abuse folks and whatnot, you know, their children or whatever the case may be. And there's all different type of power imbalances that come with abuse. Abuse can be in any form, you know, through any relationship that you may have with a particular individual or being, you know, just to be cruel. And I think some of the telltale signs of abuse, or at least from what I've seen from my research, you know, that I've looked at, one of some of the telltale signs is isolation. You know, people, you know, not really go from being very sociable to now you're very standoffish, or maybe you don't want to socialize with people like you used to. I say those are one of the signs to look out for if you're dealing with somebody, how they become real isolated and real distant from people. You know, that could be a sign that they're being abused, be it a male or a female, you know, because all these different types of abuse that people face, you know, you don't have to particularly be, you know, need to be a female to have sex, you know, sexual abuse or financial abuse or elder abuse. So these cut both ways for both male and female, you know, gay or straight relationships or whatever you're in. And then also, too, another telltale sign that a person is being abused is irrational jealousy. You know, just, you know, that somebody is actually abusing somebody. Some folks may not want you around other people, or maybe they don't want to be around other people because they feel like, you know what, this is a situation that is just not conducive to them controlling you and whatnot. Sometimes you see somebody in a relationship where they are being controlled, where they are being led astray, and there is jealousy on both sides, where you're constantly, you know, accusing each other of cheating, or, you know, you don't really have a hold off what the relationship is. And, you know, irrational jealousy on both sides in that relationship is a sign that somebody is being abused. You know, I don't want to get too deep into that. And also, too, not three actually, another sign that somebody is being abused is a subtle sign of violence that may occur in a relationship, you know, with bruises or marks, or you'll see a person who's constantly, you know, with their significant other or in any other type of relationship, they're constantly putting their hands on folks or constantly physically intimidating towards somebody. And that may be an issue as well, you know, so that's something that you should pay attention to. And then also, too, not two, I keep saying two. Also, another sign is a discounting or minimizing and trivializing effect over the relationship. How you have folks that, hey, hello Crimson, I'm just talking about the different forms of abuse that people face. They're talking about emotional abuse, financial abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, elder abuse, spiritual. And then I just went into, hey, lovely kid Japan. For anybody that may not want to check this out, I understand this is a serious subject. I mean, I get it. If this is not something that you want to hear about or talk about, I'm totally with it. I get it. You can watch it in live stream, give me a like, thumbs up, thumbs down. I get it. But I'm just trying to shed light on a situation that I think needs to be talked about, especially with some of the things that's happening in the news with different, you know, players or different people that are in relationships. You know, sometimes it's not really shed a light on, you know, as far as how people face different types of abuse and what they are and how it affects them. And I talked about how people that are abused face certain forms of isolation. They have irrational jealousy in their relationships. There's a subtle presence of violence. There's discounting and minimalizing and trivializing of the situations or the abuse that they're going through. Then also, too, there's a lot of criticizing, on the side of the abuser or the person being abused, as far as what the relationship is and how folks are being treated. There could be a lot of that. Then there's withdrawing or withholding. You have people who withhold a lot. Lovely Kid Japan, thanks Crimson, just great, drinking morning coffee, how are you? And also I keep saying two. Another sign, that's a telltale sign that somebody's being abused, is there's a lot of blaming. Sometimes, people call it victim shaming. And that's where, a person is basically discredited or minimalized, made to a trivial situation because of the abuse that they're facing and how they're being perceived, towards their, abuser, or aggressor. And, I think that's something that a lot of people face, and it's a hard thing because you're going through something and you're being abused and somebody's telling you that it's not that serious, that it's not that big of a deal, or, you're just making it up, or how dare you, accuse me of abusing you, look at how good I treat you, and things of that nature, different psychological ways that people may come at you. Crimson Fantasy says also people justify abuse. I'm doing good, lovely, just it's 9 a.m. here, gonna make dinner. 9 p.m. actually. We said 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. there. Let me look at that comment again. It's 9 p.m. here, gonna make dinner. Actually, it's just about to be 9 p.m. here too. So that's probably what the time I'm gonna go to. It says, Lovely Kid Japan says, Melma, it's a lot of abuse around the world, and yes, we have to talk about that for sure. Yeah, because I think a lot of people don't want to talk about the abuse, and I get it. People come from a standpoint where it may be hard to talk about, but if you actually care about it, or somebody in a relationship or somebody that's going through something, these are things that are important because they let people know that there's help, that there's places that they go, there's people that care, that it's a situation that's not taken lightly. And all too often, it's kind of like taken lightly or pushed to the side. Crimson Fantasy says, I knew someone that was in an abusive relationship, and I saw the marks, and she wouldn't leave. They would have to admit that it's a problem. Yes. A lot of times people don't want to admit there's a problem. People go through these relationships, and they feel like this is the only way that a person cares about them, if they put their hands on them. And, all too often, that is a big problem, both male and female. Don't be surprised if you see somebody who you think, is in a situation where they're in control and they're not. I just had to sip some tea, but I just wanted to shed some light on this issue because, I don't think it's talked about enough. I know there's organizations and conferences and different things that go through, but I just want to talk about it in a real way, just like a regular conversational piece, but serious, And this Crimson Fantasy says, of course, sure, girls and guys shouldn't abuse, but all too often, Crimson, it happens. There's females that are abusive. Also, there's emotional abuse. Yeah, I talked about emotional abuse, where people just try to manipulate you and usurp your emotions. I mean, emotional abuse is more common than you think. I mean, it goes right along with verbal abuse, just the things that people say. I mean, a person doesn't have to put their hands on you to abuse you. I mean, that's one of the misconceptions people have. Lovely Kid Japan says, yes, Crimson and Mel, I don't understand why they don't leave from the relationship. Well, just from what I've seen, from people that I know, sometimes people attach their worth to that physical aspect of the relationship, and it's just from multiple things that I've seen over the years. Sometimes people feel like they're nothing without that person. I've heard females say, I'm nothing if the man is not putting his hands on me, and it's sad to hear that, but all too often, you have ladies, or females or whatever, that don't know what they would do if they weren't in that particular relationship with that person, even despite the abuse. Like I said, I can go through countless stories, of women who stayed with a man because he had a good job, or he was just, the father of their children. Crimson Fantasy says she told me that she couldn't find a guy as good looking as the one she had. So, yeah, that's also a thing too. Sometimes vanity plays a part. People are just in relationships like that Tiana Campbell says, I watched my mom go through this, so sad. Yeah. I mean, we all have relatives. I think somebody, that would, in situations like that. And it's rough, especially when it's somebody that raised you. How do you, cope with that? That's definitely an interesting thing. Abuse is all around. I don't care who you are, what background you come from, what language you speak, or what time zone you live in. You can understand abuse, physical, mental, spiritual, financial. You can understand abuse. I mean, we've all faced abuse in some type of way. And, hopefully we haven't, put abuse on anybody else. Crimson Fantasy said, for sure, you want to help, but you don't want to tell them how to live their life. No, you don't. I think one of the thing is you don't want to tell a person how to live their life, but you also want to extend the olive branch to let them know that there's somebody that's willing to just listen. There's somebody there that's just willing to be there. Sometimes part of being a help to somebody when they're going through abuse is just being there. I've had situations where I've had particular friends, both male and female, who were going through situations and they needed to know that there was somebody on the other end that was willing to listen. A lot of times in situations we don't have to give advice. I don't have to give advice. Sometimes we don't want to hear advice. If you're going through a rough situation, you don't want to hear about how you need to leave and you shouldn't be with that person and they're no good and blah, 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 because everybody can tell you what you should do until they're in that situation themselves. I don't know what I would do if I was in that situation where I was being abused. I don't know what I would do. So for me to turn around and tell you this is what you should do, that's dicey. That gets murky, because the reality of it is the best thing I should be doing is listening to understand, then to be understood, and then if you want help, give you options. Crimson Fantasy says, for sure, sometimes hearing it come out of your mouth and have someone just listen, it puts it in perspective. Yeah, it definitely does put it into perspective. It does definitely put it into perspective, and it helps you to understand. Lovely Kid Japan says, oh my God, Mrs. Campbell, it has to be the worst to watch, right? My friend has that problem, but she doesn't want to because of her kids. She doesn't want to leave because of her kids. But I think it's a bad situation for kids because they don't understand. True. I agree with you, Lovely Kid Japan. It is a bad situation for kids because they don't understand what's going on, and then they have to decide between the two, I guess parents, who they love more. Now you have a situation where it's mommy and daddy, or if you're in a situation it's daddy and daddy, or mommy and mommy, and then now there's a domestic situation, and now you're forced to decide and pick and choose, and you don't want to choose, and the child is trying to put all that into perspective, and then there's the separation that comes with that, and it's crazy. Mrs. Campbell says yes, because she would take them and my siblings and run. Crimson Fantasy says it's bad when kids are involved. I'm sorry to hear that, Lovely. Yeah, I mean, when kids are affected by this, it's always a problem. I mean, and I think when it comes to domestic violence especially, a lot of people are probably not thinking about how it affects the kids. And that's something that really, 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 really needs to be addressed. How it affects the kids, and what do you do to try to help the children cope with what's going on, and letting the children know that it's not their fault. And I say to any children out there, or anybody that may have been in situations like that, it's not your fault, especially as a child. And Mrs. Campbell said it made me stronger, and I'm glad it did make you stronger. Sorry you had to go through that, but many of us have had situations where we have family members that go through things, and you get through it and you become wiser and stronger, and you try to teach the next generation how to be better suited in relationships. I mean, relationships don't have to be perfect. People cheat on each other. They're not monogamous, and promiscuity, skewity comes around and it goes around, and people have different things. They go with the flow and do what they do. Be that as it may, I still say folks need to be careful about putting their hands on folks, or how you speak to folks, or how you treat people in any particular relationships, because I personally believe in karma, and I think that's something that folks need to be aware of. Lovely Kid Japan says she's living in Japan and she can't go back to her country. So sad. Crimson Fantasy says, what I've learned is to walk away from a situation, calm down, and go back and try to fix it. Also, don't be drunk. Yeah, alcohol does, not to make light of it, alcohol does create a problem, when you're in an abusive situation. being inebriated or not thinking straight or whatnot can definitely land you in a whole heap of trouble, especially when you stand in front of a judge after getting your breathalyzer. Laura says, hi Mel. Hi Laura. I'm just coming down to the end of this live stream, but I was talking about abuse, and I will wrap it up and I will summarize some of what I was talking about. I was just talking about the different forms of abuse, how they affect people. You have emotional abuse, aka psychological abuse, financial abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, elder abuse. Lovely Kid Japan says she's living with him and his family. Sorry to hear that. Laura says, hello everyone, Tina, Crimson, and all. And basically, I'm just trying to, highlight that, there's different forms of abuse that people face, and these are things that need to be acknowledged, and people need to know that there's somebody there that cares about their plight, their struggle, and the things that they're going through. And Crimson Fantasy says, hey Marta, how are you? On that note, though, I will get into more of the psychology behind it, or the philosophy behind what people go through in the next live stream. I do have to end this with the respect and value of people's time. Thank you for tuning in to this, me talking about abuse part 1, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you for everybody to tune into this live stream, and thank you for all your input and everything that you had to offer for this live stream. Hopefully this was insightful. Hopefully this was an interesting, engaging conversation. Take care.